You need to think about it more. I'm not doing that to be fancy, even though I like being fancy. Communicating simple things by signs is important. CEO may not, or board of directors may not be able to relate to specific numbers, but they relate to those things. Go ahead, don't go ahead, be careful. Be careful on the positive side, be careful on the negative side. I mean, they probably taught you that, oh, communication is done better with PowerPoint. You can actually communicate a lot better in Excel compared to PowerPoint, right? It's that simple. Now, let's kind of build in some other stuff. Oh, one thing you need to be careful about these. So if this is, mm, you know, it takes different icons. If you're using the MPV function directly in Excel, those cash flows need to be consecutive. If there is something skipping, Excel doesn't assume that it's zero. Okay, you have to explicitly write as zero. So if one of these things are zero, it needs to be explicitly put in. All right. Now let's calculate another one, IRR. First, let's define mathematically what it is. The rate of discount that gives you a zero NPV basically means the following. It solves the following equation. This is the highly nonlinear equation. There is no explicit solution. In fact, if you define x, this is an nth degree polynomial in x. In the field of complex numbers, which is real and imaginary numbers, it has n solutions, but generically, it does not even have to have any solution at all. If cash flows are what we call conventional, which means all future cash flows are either positive or zero. Or using the fancy name, all future cash flows are non-negative. If that is the case, we know mathematically that there exists only one real solution to this problem. There exists a unique solution to this problem. And Excel can calculate that using the function IRR, which uses all the cash flows, including the negative U01, so-called internal rate of return of this project, as the numbers are here, is 1255. And we also need a decision rule for standalone. If IRR is greater than the cost of capital, accept. Otherwise, reject. When cash flows are conventional and we have standalone projects, NPV and IRR is going to yield exactly the same decision, assuming we're not dilly-dallying with the gray area issues. Okay? If cash flows are conventional, IRR is greater than R if and only if NPV is greater than 0. If and only if simply means if NPV is greater than 0, IRR is greater than the discount rate, or if IRR is greater than discount rate, NPV is 0, greater than 0. But this breaks down if cash flows are not conventional. The reason is if there are future negative cash flows, there are typically multiple solutions to the equation that defines ARR. Well, if there are two things that solve that equation, A, which one is internal? The entire question is ill-posed. So the concept of IRR does not mean anything. You can come up with a number, but it doesn't mean anything. Let's do an example. And negative cash flows do happen. Think about a mountaintop removal mining project. You go ahead, coal mining, you do whatever you want, but one of the requirements is when you're done, you're going to leave the site as you found it, right? You're going to put more trees, do this, do that. That means at the end of the project, the last few years, you're going to have negative cash flows. Suppose a project costs $1,000 and first year it's going to make you 2,000 and but it's going to cost you $500 the last year, right? So let's find out. I'm just going to do it here. First and foremost, the function IRR technically has two arguments. The first argument is the set of cash flows. The second one is an optional one. Since it finds it using an iterative scheme, you actually can provide a guess. If you don't provide anything, Excel picks something internally. So let's do it with a 0. It's at 71%. Does it sound right to you guys? How about let's pick another number, negative 0.9, negative 71%. So both of those solve that equation. This is very extreme. You will never get like plus or minus negative 71, but sometimes you're going to get 5%, sometimes you're going to get 20%. Which one is the internal? So how do you make a decision? You can't. The entire question is ill-posed. So you don't ever want to use IRR as a criteria when there are unconventional cash flows. Of course, in those cases, you can always go back to NPV. NPV does not care whether your future cash flows are positive or negative. If they're negative, it's going to take it down. If they're positive, it's going to take it up. That's it. Now, IRR also becomes more of an issue if projects are mutually exclusive. Again, decision rule is simple. Pick the project with the highest IRR, provided it would have been acceptable by itself. That sounds nice. I have 3 projects. One of them yields 20, 15, the other is 10. My cost of capital is 8. They're all good, right? So I'm going to pick the one with the 20.